Welcome to Emmado's Corner, where the heart of Africa's rich storytelling tradition comes to life. I'm your host, and you can call me Emmado. In this corner of the world, we'll dive into timeless African folktales, exploring their wisdom, magic, and moral lessons. From ancient myths to legends passed down through generations, you'll discover stories that resonate with cultures from all over the continent. Subscribe and join me as we honor the past and keep these powerful stories alive.
The air in Afigya, a prosperous village within the Ashanti Empire, was thick with the scent of burning incense and the distant echo of morning drums. The great Nana Kwadwo Poku, a highly respected elder and landowner, lay motionless on a finely woven raffia mat inside his compound. His once powerful frame had withered, his breath shallow, his skin darkened by time and wisdom. Surrounding him were his sons, nephews, and the elders of the family, their faces lined with concern. Outside, women wailed softly, their voices rising and falling in harmony with the drum beats that signaled the impending departure of a great man. Summoning the last of his strength, Nana Kwadwo Poku gestured for his eldest son, Opoku Gyamfi, to step closer. The young man, broad-shouldered and dignified, knelt beside him, listening intently. "My son," the old man whispered, "our ancestors swore an oath. This land must never be divided by greed. It is sacred. Protect it." His frail hand gripped Opoku's wrist with surprising strength. "The spirits watch. Remember this." With those final words, the patriarch's spirit departed, his body finally still. A deep silence filled the compound before an eruption of cries from the women, signaling the end of an era. The phantom-formed drums roared to life, sending a message to the heavens that Nana Kwadwo Poku has joined the ancestors. Unknown to many, lurking in the shadows, Kwabena Adu, Opoku's cousin, clenched his fist. He had his own ambitions. The land, vast and rich, was too valuable to remain untouched. The oath of the ancestors meant nothing to him. The mourning period lasted for several weeks, as was custom in the Ashanti Empire. Libations were poured, elders recited the names of ancestors, and sacrifices were made to ensure Nana Kwadwo Poku's smooth transition into the spirit world. Yet, beneath the surface of the elaborate rituals, tension brewed like a storm, waiting to break. On the final day of the Dotiai funeral rites, the family gathered at the Abrempong, the chief's palace, to discuss inheritance matters. The Asanteheni's chief elder, Nana Kwadwo, presided over the meeting, flanked by other respected members of the Oyoko clan. The time had come to decide the fate of Nana Kwadwo Poku's vast land. Opoku Gyamfi, standing tall and composed, spoke first. "My father made his wishes clear before he departed. The land must not be divided. We must honor the oaths of the ancestors and preserve it as one." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many nodded in agreement, acknowledging the weight of the ancestral tradition. But then, Kwabena Adu rose. Unlike Opoku, who had spent his life serving the empire as a warrior, Kwabena was a man of trade. His wealth came from dealing in gold and cloth with the coastal Fante and even the Europeans. His voice was smooth and calculated. "My father was also a son of Nana Kwadwo Poku's lineage," he declared. "Why should Opoku inherit everything? Why my father's bloodline is cast aside? The land belongs to all of us." The tension in the room thickened. Some elders exchanged uneasy glances, while others whispered among themselves. Though tradition often favored the firstborn son, land disputes had torn families apart before. Nana Kwadwo leaned forward. "The oath is sacred," he said, "but justice also must prevail. If an oath was taken, we must seek its truth. If it was broken, the spirits must bear witness." silence followed. The land in question was no ordinary land. It bordered the Nkinkin forest, a place of old spirits and buried secrets. Some claimed the ancestors still roamed there, watching. If the oath had indeed been sworn, the spirits would decide its fate. The village elders decreed that a customary trial would be held in 3 days at the shrine of Nana Kwadwo, the river deity who governed truth and justice. Both Opoku and Kwabena would present their cases before the gods. If the oath was real, the spirits would confirm it. As the meeting ended, Opoku clenched his fist. He knew Kwabena was a cunning man, capable of twisting truth. But what worried him most was the land itself. His father's warning echoed in his mind: the spirits watch. The day leading up to the customary trial were filled with tension. The people of Afigya whispered in small groups, debating who had the right claim to the land. Some elders sided with Opoku, honoring Nana Kwadwo Poku's final words, while others believed Kwabena's argument held merit. The contested land was no ordinary plot. It stretched beyond the farmlands and bordered the Nkinkin forest, a place of mystery and ancestral reverence. Stories of the spirits that roamed there had been passed down for generations. Some said the trees whispered at night, carrying the voices of the dead. Others claimed that those who entered with greedy hearts never returned. As the sun set over the village, Opoku sat outside his compound, sharpening his afena, short sword. His mother, Mamefia, a woman of wisdom and quiet strength, watched him with concern. "My son," she said, sitting beside him, "the spirits are watching. You must not let anger cloud your heart." Opoku exhaled slowly. "I do not seek to fight, mother, but Kwabena twists words like a weaver's thread. What if the elders believe him?" Mamefia touched his arm. "Then let the spirits decide. If the oath was truly sworn, they will not remain silent." Elsewhere, in his compound, Kwabena Adu was meeting with his closest allies, traders, warriors, and distant relatives who shared his ambition. "The land is wealth," he told them. "With it, we control the trade routes, the farms, and the future of this village. I will not let Opoku keep it all." One of his men, Emmado, leaned forward. "But if the spirits bear witness, what if they speak against you?" Kwabena smirked. "The spirits favor those who act, not those who wait. I have my own ways of ensuring that the gods remain silent." A chill passed through the room, unnoticed by most, but the old storyteller, who sat by the fire in the corner, simply shook his head. "The land knows his rightful owner," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else, "and those who defy it shall learn the price of their greed." As the night deepened, the harmattan wind blew through Afigya, carrying the scent of dust and something else, something older than the village itself. The ancestors were watching. The day of the customary trial arrived. The entire village of Afigya gathered at the shrine of Nana Kwadwo, the river deity, believed to be the guardian of truth and justice. The shrine, built on the bank of the sacred Sobin River, was an ancient place where disputes that could not be settled by men were placed before the gods. The elders, draped in fine kente cloth, sat on carved wooden stools under the shade of a great udom tree. The Okonfo, priest of Nana Kwadwo, a stern-faced man named Okonfo Anokai Pine, stood barefoot before the shrine, his body adorned with white clay symbols. In his hands, he held a staff decorated with golden bells and cowrie shells, a sign of connection to the spirits. Opoku Gyamfi and Kwabena Adu stood before him, each flanked by their supporters. Opoku's warriors, men who fought alongside him in his past battles, stood in silent solidarity. Kwabena, in contrast, had traders and men of influence from nearby villages by his side. Their presence a reminder of his wealth and connections. Okomfo Anokei Pine struck the ground thrice with his staff, signaling the start of the proceedings. The spirits are present, he announced. Speak and let truth be revealed. Opoku stepped forward first. Before my father, Nana Kwadwo Poku, left this world, he made his wishes clear. The land must remain whole, as was sworn by our ancestors. The oath must not be broken. The crowd murmured in agreement. Many had witnessed Nana Kwadwo Poku's rule and respected his judgment. Then, Kwabena Adu stepped forward, his voice measured and firm. I do not deny the wisdom of our late elder, he said, but my father was also his blood. If an oath was sworn, why was my father excluded? I claim my rightful share, not out of greed, but out of justice. The elder, Nana Tumasi, nodded solemnly. The truth must be known. He turned to the priest. Okomfo, what must be done? The priest's deep eyes scanned the crowd before he spoke. A sacred drink shall be prepared from the river of Nana Asujebi. Both men shall drink. If the oath was truly sworn and one seeks to break it, the spirit shall judge. A hush fell over the gathering. The Unswok Krom Krom, holy water, ritual was not taken lightly. If an oath had been made and either man lied, the spirits would strike them down. Kwabena's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Hesitation, perhaps. Opoku, on the other hand, stood firm. The priest turned and began the ritual, chanting sacred words as he fetched water from the sobbing river. The moment of truth had come. Would the ancestors reveal their will, or had Kwabena already ensured their silence? The air around the shrine of Nana Asujebi was thick with tension as Okomfo Anokei Pine raised the Unsokronkron, the sacred water that will determine the truth. The priests chant echo across the shrine, invoking the river deity to bear witness to the trial. The elders, the villagers, and even the birds in the nearby Udom trees seemed to hold their breath. Okomfo Anokei dipped a calabash bowl into the sacred river, swirling the clear water with a bundle of Emmado leaves believed to purify the soul. He turned first to Opoku Gyamfi. Drink, he commanded. If your heart is pure, the gods shall protect you. Without hesitation, Opoku took the calabash, raised it to his lips and drank deeply. The cool water trickled down his throat, and the villagers watched in silence. A few moments passed. Nothing happened. The priest nodded approvingly. He speaks truth. Then Okomfo Anokei turned to Kwabena Adu. The priest's gaze was sharp, piercing through Kwabena's outward confidence. Now you, he said, holding out the second calabash. Let the spirits judge your words. Kwabena took the bowl slowly. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Despite the shade of the trees, he hesitated for only a moment before drinking it. The water was cool, refreshing, but then, as he swallowed, a sudden cough erupted from his chest. He staggered back, gasping. The crowd gasped. A murmur spread through the villagers. The gods have spoken, someone whispered. Kwabena clenched his fist, forcing himself to stand straight. It's just a cough, he said hoarsely, regaining his composure. Nothing more. Okomfo Anokei's eyes narrowed. He placed the empty calabash down and faced the elders. The spirits have given a sign, he said, but not yet a judgment. Nana Tumasi, the chief elder, stroked his beard. Then the matter is not settled. He turned to both men. This land has a history deeper than any of you. If the oath was made, it may be recorded, not just in words, but in the land itself. The Ashanti emissary, who had been silent until now, spoke. The golden stool commands that no dispute over land shall lead to war among brothers. If there is doubt, then we must seek the wisdom of the ancestors. An elder woman, Nana Kwadwo Poku, the village's oldest storyteller, stood. Then, let them go to the grove of the ancestors, she said, her voice heavy with meaning. The villagers gasped. The grove of the ancestors was deep in the Nkinkin forest, where the spirits of past rulers were said to linger. No man entered lightly, for the trees whispered secrets, and the wrong-hearted never returned. Okonfo Anokai nodded. So be it. In 3 nights, Opoku Gyamfi and Kwabena Adu shall travel to the grove. If the ancestors hold the truth, they will reveal it. The cold wind blew through the shrine, rustling the trees. The land itself seemed to shudder at what was to come. Opoku stood tall, ready for the journey, but Kwabena Adu, though silent, felt an unease settle deep in his bones, for he had already tried to silence the spirit once, and he feared they would not forget. The night before the journey to the grove of the ancestors, Afigya was restless. Fires burned into every compound, their flickering lights casting uneasy shadows against the mud walls. The elders murmured among themselves, unsure of what the next day would bring. Few men had entered the Nkinkin forest, and even fewer had returned unchanged. Opoku Gyamfi sat in quiet reflection outside his mother's hut. Mamefia, her face lined with worry, placed a wooden bowl of steaming yam and groundnut stew before him. You must eat, she said gently. You will need your strength. Opoku sighed, his thoughts clouded by the coming trial. Mother, do you believe the ancestors will speak? She met his gaze, unwavering. They have already spoken, my son. The spirits know the truth. It is only men who choose to ignore it. Meanwhile, in his own compound, Kwabena Adu paced anxiously. His closest advisor, Emmado, sat nearby, watching him carefully. You are troubled, Yao observed. Kwabena turned sharply. You saw what happened at the shrine. The spirits, he hesitated, lowering his voice. I tried to silence them once, but they are not blind. Emmado exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Then, perhaps it is time to reconsider. If the ancestors reveal the truth, you will lose everything. Kwabena clenched his fist. I will not lose. The forest is dangerous, but danger can be controlled. Emmado raised an eyebrow. And what do you propose? Kwabena leaned in, his voice a whisper. There are men, hunters from the far villages, who know the forest well. If an accident were to happen, no one would question it. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Emmado nodded slowly. By dawn, the village gathered at the edge of the Nkinkin forest. The elders, the Okonfo, and the warriors all stood in solemn silence. The ancestors are watching, Okonfo Anokai declared. Opoku Gyamfi and Kwabena Adu, you must enter together. You will walk to the grove of the ancestors and seek the truth. You must return before the sun sets tomorrow. The 2 men stepped forward. Opoku's heart was steady, while Kwabena's mind raced with unseen plans. As they crossed into the dense trees, the village faded behind them. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient bark. Shadows twisted between the towering odum and wawa trees, and the rustling of unseen creatures filled the air. With each step, they ventured deeper into the unknown, and with each step, unseen eyes watched them from the darkness. The dense canopy of the Nkinkin forest swallowed the light, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was thick with moisture, and every step Opoku Gyamfi and Kwabena Adu took was accompanied by the distant call of unseen creatures. The silence between them was heavy, each man lost in his own thoughts. Opoku moved with steady confidence, his hand resting near the hilt of his Afena short sword. He had been trained as a warrior and knew the dangers that lurked in the wild. Kwabena, on the other hand, appeared uneasy, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something or someone to emerge from the trees. The spirits dwell in places like this, Opoku murmured, breaking the silence. My father once told me that the wind in the trees carries the voices of ancestors. Kwabena forced a chuckle. If that is true, then perhaps they will guide us quickly to the grove so we can be done with this foolishness. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves violently. Both men halted. The whispering wind carried something else with it, a low, almost imperceptible murmur, like voices speaking from beyond the veil. Opoku stiffened. Did you hear that? Kwabena swallowed hard. It's just the wind. But Opoku wasn't convinced. He had spent many nights on the battlefield, and this felt different. The very air around them seemed to pulse with an ancient presence. They pressed on, following the narrow winding path towards the grove of the ancestors. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. Roots twisted unnaturally, and the trees loomed like silent watchers. Then a twig snapped somewhere behind them. Opoku spun around, his hand gripping his sword. Who's there? Silence. Kwabena's eyes darted between the trees. He knew who was there. The hunters he had sent ahead were watching, waiting for the right moment. If things went as planned, Opoku would not leave this forest alive. A sudden chill ran down his spine. The deal he had made was simple, but would the forest allow it? Opoku turned back to him, eyes narrowed. Stay alert, we are not alone. Kwabena forced a nod, but inside his heart pounded. The forest had always been a place of mystery, but tonight it felt like a living entity, watching, listening, waiting. And as they walked deeper into its depths, the whispers in the wind grew louder. The ancestors were near. The deeper they walked into the Nkinkin forest, the more oppressive the air became. It was as if the very trees carried a burden, their twisted roots and gnarled branches whispering secrets too ancient to be understood. Opoku Gyamfi tightened his grip on his antenna, every instinct telling him that something was amiss. Though he could not see anything unusual, he felt a presence, a heavy, watchful force lingering in the shadows. Kwabena Adu, walking just a few steps behind, was feeling something else entirely, dread. He had made an arrangement with hunters from the outer villages, promising them wealth in exchange for ensuring that Opoku never left the forest. The plan had been simple, an ambush along the trail. Yet, now as they walked further, a sickening feeling crept into his gut. The men should have made their move by now. Why hadn't they? Then, a sharp cry split the silence, a sound of terror that ended just abruptly as it had begun. Both men froze. Opoku turned sharply, scanning the darkness between the trees. That was no animal, he said. Kwabena remained still, his face pale. He recognized that voice. It was one of the hunters. The wind howled through the trees, carrying something else, a low guttural growl that did not belong to any beast of the land. A shadow shifted in the distance, moving unnaturally between the trees. Opoku's voice was steady, but his eyes were alert. Something is here with us. Kwabena's hands were shaking. We need to turn back. Opoku narrowed his eyes. Why are you afraid? Before Kwabena could answer, another blood-curdling scream rang through the night. This time it was closer. Then, silence. Opoku raised his sword, stepping forward cautiously. Who is out there? Show yourself. Nothing. Then, just beyond the bend in the trail, they saw it. A body hanging limp from a tree, its lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. It was one of the hired hunters. His throat was slashed, but there was no footprints, no sign of struggle. Kwabena's breath came in quick gasps. His mind raced. This was wrong. The men he had sent were supposed to kill Opoku, not be haunted themselves. "We need to leave," he whispered. Opoku didn't move. His gaze lingered on the body, then shifted towards the darkened path ahead. "No," he said firmly. "We move forward." The whispers in the trees grew louder. The shadows seemed to stretch towards them. The ancestors were watching. And something else was waiting. The whispers in the Nkinkin forest grew louder, swirling around Opoku and Kwabena like unseen hands brushing against their skin. The trees loomed higher, their branches interwoven like ancient fingers clutching secrets untold. The forest was alive, not just with the presence of spirits, but with something far more ominous. Kwabena Adu's heart pounded. The men he had sent to kill Opoku were being haunted instead. This was not how it was supposed to happen. He took a step back, his breathing shallow. "Opoku, we must leave this forest. It is cursed." Opoku did not move. His gaze was locked on the lifeless body hanging from the trees, its empty eyes staring at them. His instincts screamed at him. This was no ordinary death. The body had not fallen to the ground. It had been placed there, a warning. "The ancestors are watching," he murmured. Kwabena scoffed, his voice edged with panic. "Then let them watch from afar. I am leaving." He turned to go, but a gust of wind roared through the trees, so strong that it nearly knocked him off his feet. The leaves rustled violently, though no stone was in sight. Then a voice echoed through the forest, low, guttural, and not of this world. "No one lives before judgment." Kwabena froze mid-step. His body stiffened, his blood turned to ice, his lips parted, but no sound came out. Opoku's grip on his afena tightened. He knew that voice did not belong to any living man. The forest itself had spoken. Then, a sharp rustling in the undergrowth. Opoku spun around, sword raised. The bushes trembled violently, as though something large was moving within. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness. At first, it seemed human, a tall robed form, its face shrouded in shadows, its feet never quite touching the ground. It wore a cloak woven from leaves and bones, and its hands, if they could be called that, were elongated, thin, and blackened as if burned by fire. Kwabena stumbled backwards, his throat dry. "No, this cannot be." The figure lifted its head, revealing a face not of flesh, but of stone, cracked and worn with time. Deep within it, hollow eye sockets and a rare golden light burned. "The land remembers," the voice boomed, though the figure's mouth never moved. The oath was sworn. The oath was broken. Kwabena collapsed to his knees. He could no longer deny it. The spirits, the ancestors, had risen, and they had come to claim their due. The spirit's golden eyes burned through the darkness, its hollow gaze fixed on Kwabena Adu. The wind had stilled, and the entire Nkinkin forest seemed to hold its breath. The very earth trembled beneath them, as if the land itself recognized the presence of something beyond mortal comprehension. Opoku Gyamfi remained firm, his afena sword still gripped tightly. Though his heart pounded, he forced himself to stand tall before the spirit. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady. The spirit did not move, but its voice reverberated through the trees, deep and thunderous. "I am the keeper of the oath, the guardian of the land stolen, the witness to the betrayal." Kwabena's body trembled as he knelt before the entity. I did nothing wrong," he stammered, though even he did not believe his own words. I only claimed what was mine. The spirit let out a sound, a deep echoing wail of sorrow and anger, like the cries of 1,000 forgotten souls. The trees groaned, and the ground beneath them cracked slightly. You sought to divide what was sworn to be whole. You called upon the hands of killers, but they were swallowed by the land they sought to defile. Kwabena gasped, realization dawning. The hunters he had hired, they hadn't just been killed, they had been claimed by the spirits. Opoku's jaw tightened. If an oath was sworn, then let the ancestors reveal it. The spirit raised his blackened hands, and suddenly the ground before them split open. A deep rumbling shook the forest as ancient roots twisted upwards, revealing something buried beneath the earth. A stone tablet carved with faded symbols rose from the soil. The markings were old, weathered, yet still legible beneath the death and moss. The elders had once spoken of such things, sacred stones used to seal pacts made before the gods. Kwabena's eyes widened in horror. There, etched into the stone, was the undeniable truth. The land belonged to the bloodline of Opoku Gyamfi's ancestors, never to be divided, never to be sold. The very thing he had denied, the thing he had hired men to kill for, had been preserved beneath the soil all along. The wind howled, the spirit's voice thundered once more. The land remembers, ancestors remember. What shall be done with the one who broke the oath? Kwabena felt the weight of the spirit's judgment pressing down on him. His breath came in short gasps. He turned to Opoku, desperation in his eyes. Brother, mercy. Opoku stared at him for a long moment, though rage burned in his chest. He knew the decision was no longer his to make. He turned to the spirit. What do the ancestors demand? The golden flames in the spirit's eyes flickered, and it lifted one hand towards Kwabena. The ground trembled beneath him, the earth shifting as roots curled around his ankles. Kwabena screamed, "No, please!" But the ancestors had decided. With a final echoing wail, the forest itself swallowed him whole. The ground closed over him as if he had never existed. Then silence. Opoku stood, frozen, his breath heavy in the stillness. The spirit turned its glowing gaze towards him one last time. The oath remains unbroken. Then, like mist before the morning sun, the spirit faded into the night. The forest released a final sigh, and for the first time since they had entered the air felt at peace. Opoku knew one thing for certain: his family's land was safe. But he would never forget the price that had been paid to keep it whole. The silence in the kinking forest stretched long and heavy after the spirit's departure. The trees, once restless and watchful, now stood still, as though they too were reflecting on the events that had just unfolded. Opoku Gyamfi stood where Kwabena had been swallowed by the earth, his eyes fixed on the spot where the ground had closed over his cousin's body. A dull ache settled in his chest, though he could not tell if it was sorrow or relief. Kwabena had been family, a man who had once shared his blood, his dreams and his hopes. Yet in the end, it had been betrayal that had led him to this point. The land had chosen. Opoku turned away, wiping the sweat from his brow. The air was cool now, almost calm, and the voices in the trees had faded into nothingness. Yet, there remained a lingering presence, a weight, like the very soul of the forest, watching him still. The stone tablet had risen from the earth, its symbols marking the path of truth. Opoku knelt beside it, his fingers brushing the cold surface. The ancient markings were still etched deep in the stone, telling the story of his ancestors, of land that could never be divided or stolen. A cold breeze rustled the leaves around him. Opoku's heart felt heavy with the realization that though the land was now protected, there would be consequences. What had happened to Kwabena was not just a punishment, it was a warning. The spirit had said the land remembers, and Opoku understood that now. The land, the forest, and the ancestors, they all held the power to reclaim what was once theirs. Opoku rose to his feet, his gaze steady as he looked towards the horizon. There was no going back. His journey had only just begun. He would have to return to the village, to the people who still believed the land was divided, people who would now have to be reminded of the sacred bond between family and the land. He turned towards the village with a heavy heart, knowing that the next chapter of his life would not be one of peace, but of remembrance and reconciliation.
And so, Opoku leaves the forest, forever changed by what he has witnessed. But his journey is far from over. What awaits him in the village? How will the village react to the truth? And what lessons will the ancestors teach? Find out in part 2 of this epic tale. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in part 2.